Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. We are back. This is Media Ciphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. We're now just joined by a very special guest. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to come on our program. But I wanted to speak with you. I heard about this through the grapevine of Michigan politics, and I thought it was something really important to cover here on our program. So uh, I'm joined today by Huwaida Arraf, and they ran a campaign for University of Michigan Regent. Um, and if you remember last week, we actually covered a little bit about what's going on over there, particularly in regards to some of the anti-genocide protests going on campus. And you recently ran for this, and there was some interesting things happened at the Michigan convention, Michigan Democratic Party convention. I'm sorry. So first, I'm just if you want to introduce yourselves or yourself, yeah, sorry. If you want to just introduce yourself to the listeners real quick, and then we'll kind of get into um, both your campaign and what recently happened.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Huwaida Arraf. I am Michigan born and raised. I am a human rights and civil rights attorney. I am a Palestinian American, so my parents came over from Palestine to start their family here in the United States. Was raised in a union family. I'm oldest of five, just a little personal background information. But like you said, I graduated from the University of Michigan, and then I volunteered for a few years in the occupied Palestinian territory, so saw with my own eyes some of the horrific human rights abuses, and that compelled me to study the law so I could learn about legal mechanisms for obtaining justice for victims of human rights abuses and holding perpetrators accountable. I also co-founded an organization when I was there called the International Solidarity Movement. It has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's still operating today. In fact, sadly, we had one of our members killed just a few days ago. She was in a Palestinian village and joining them for Friday prayers and demonstrations against the confiscation of their land. Her name was Aisha Noor, an American citizen from Washington State, 26 years old. She had just recently graduated, I think, with her master's, and an Israeli sniper, one shot to the head, and she passed. And unfortunately, it's not she's not the first of our members, international members, nor the first American to be killed by Israeli forces for being in the occupied Palestinian territories, for bearing witness to what they're doing to Palestinians. In 2003, Israeli forces ran over our colleague Rachel Corrie in Gaza with a D9 armored bulldozer and completely flattened her. And they continue, unfortunately, to get away with this because they operate with impunity. The United States, unfortunately, is always defending Israel's actions and continues to provide Israel with the weapons necessary to continue this brutal apartheid regime and occupation, and as we're seeing now in Gaza, a full-blown genocide. A long way of saying human rights attorney, and then in Michigan also I practice domestic law, civil rights. So I do also civil rights. And as you mentioned, I recently ran for a position as a University of Michigan Regent. I can tell you a little bit more about that if you'd like. Oh, you're muted, or I can't hear
Sorry,
you.
sorry. Thank you so much for that, and my deepest condolences to the loss of your colleague. And unfortunately, stories like this, we've ran way too many of them in the last 11 months, and this show's been on for about 8 years, and we've had a lot of stories like that, unfortunately. Um, so with that, I was wondering if you could explain to the listeners Um, j- just kind of back to basics, because again, there's a lot of different entry levels, but the role of regents at the university level, and why you decided to run for regent at the University of Michigan.
Sure. Well, there are 8 regions at the University of Michigan, and actually in at Michigan's kind of 3 flagship universities, University of Michigan, and then Michigan State University and Wayne State University. Their governing boards are made up of 8 members. So the regents, the Board of Regents, is University of Michigan's governing board, and they are responsible for really setting policy for the university. They are responsible for the university's endowment, for investing, and like I said, setting overall policy for the university. And why I decided to run is uh, because of what we've been seeing in terms of the behavior of the Board of Regents when it comes to the treatment of their students, staff, and faculty at the university. I hadn't been considering running for this before, but in late July, a group of students asked me if I would consider it. And we talked about really their experience over the past year for sure, but even for longer than that. And they have been really ignored. Their requests for meetings with the Board of Regents have gone unanswered, unfulfilled. They have been slandered, they have been mocked, and they have been attacked. A full also disclosure, as an attorney, I was representing one of the students who was going through the university disciplinary proceedings, and it was a clear example, too, of how the university administration was violating its own procedures in order to go after students who were protesting against a genocide and against, the university's complicity by way of their investments. No matter what you think about what the students were protesting about, I hope we can all agree that they have a right to protest, and it is something that they should not be attacked for doing, that they should be protected. It's a protected First Amendment right, certainly throughout the country, but when we're talking about at universities, and especially esteemed universities like the University of Michigan, this should be something that is encouraged and not punished. Um, so I made really a last minute decision to get into the race. And this was only about 2.5 weeks before the Michigan Democratic Party convention, where the elections would take place for the nomination. So at the convention, there would be a vote to nominate the Democratic nominees to run in the general election. And the University of Michigan Board of Regents race was one of 5. There were also nominations for state Supreme Court, for the State Board of Education, and for the other universities boards that I mentioned, Wayne State and Michigan State University. But the University of Michigan, once I got into the race, suddenly it became a contested race, and it was the only contested race. All of the other positions, there were only 2 people running on a slate together, kind of anointed, if you will, and they were just passed with voice votes. Here are 2 slate candidates, approve, yes. Uh, Suddenly, when I got into the race, there were 3 candidates for 2 positions. It became a contested vote. To go back a little bit, once I decided to get into the race, the students just did a tremendous amount of like electoral organizing and work that it was so inspiring. And if I could take you just to the convention, it was more spirit than I've seen at previous conventions. The convention was flooded with a lot of young people, and they brought their neighbors and their families and their kids, and um, we were probably more than half, clearly more than half of the convention, and not just in physical presence, but in enthusiasm, in participating in the democratic process. A lot of them were first time members of the Michigan Democratic Party. And because they had previously felt disenfranchised, that there isn't a political home for me anywhere. But when they heard that I was going to run for this position, they decided to become members. They decided to get involved, and they really did some tremendous organizing and showed up with so much hope and enthusiasm that it was inspiring. And I thought that the party as a whole would be really welcoming of this, because at all of our meetings, at the local level, there's always talk about how do we get more young people involved. And here my campaign came hundreds of new young people. But unfortunately, that is not what we experience. That is not what they experience as first-time convention goers. And I can talk about the various forms of voter disenfranchisement or intimidation or voter suppression tactics that were used. But when it came down to the vote, even though I did have an overwhelming majority of the popular vote, the Michigan Democratic Party uses a weighted formula. So depending on where you're from, the district and the county, there's a certain number of delegates assigned to you. And then depending on how many people from that area come to the convention is how many points your vote is worth. So we had situations where one person from somewhere in the Upper Peninsula, let's say their vote was worth 40 points, whereas a University of Michigan student, their vote was worth less than 1 point, 0.9. But that is the weighted formula that they used, and we're not contesting the weighted formula, but we are contesting the way the vote was carried out, because even though I had an overwhelming majority of the popular vote, what happened is after the vote closed, there were 2.5 hours we didn't hear anything. The vote was done electronically. So where are the results? They never told me anything. People from my campaign were trying to go to where the vote tabulation was being done, as is traditional. You usually have a monitor, what they call an election challenger, just for the integrity of the vote. And we were repeatedly denied. We were not allowed to where the vote was being tabulated. And yet we were seeing other candidates and supporters of other candidates going into that area. So that raised really a red flag. And then after 2.5 hours, they came out, the representative of the party came out and announced that I had lost. And the majority of the people who were still in the convention hall, a lot of people had gone home, but were my supporters and were just shocked and were asking to be able to see the math, like how did that happen? And we got no answers. Basically, they announced it and left, only came back on stage to kick us out of the convention hall. And they had called in police also, about a dozen and a half armed police officers that forced us out of the building in really a show of just not democracy, because you have this situation where there was a vote taking place and there were irregularities, least of which is let somebody from my campaign, like the other campaigns, monitor the vote tabulation. Why 2.5 hours delay when it was electronic voting? The results should have been immediate. And then when we asked to see the math, you kick us out of the convention hall. So I asked to contest the vote. They told me that there was not really a way of doing it. I emailed later that same night. I said, I want to reiterate, we don't accept this. We'd like to see the raw data just to see how the vote was tabulated and reassure people, because all of these new people who had come to the convention were left feeling disillusioned, upset, that they had been cheated. And initially, we weren't saying there was cheating. We're just saying, just let us see how you calculated this, because one of the things that according to the Michigan Democratic Party's rules on voting, this should have been tabulated according to slate voting. And a member of the Michigan Democratic Party State Central Committee who was involved in writing the rules on voting said that this should have been tabulated as a slate vote, and as a slate vote, if they would have done it that way, I would have won. But even if you don't agree that it should have been tabulated slate voting, at least let us see the data. But we did not get that. The next day, I got an email with what was attached is purporting to be the raw data, but it wasn't. What was given to us was that the Michigan Democratic Party used in their final calculation. So this was the data after 2.5 hours behind a curtain of doing I don't know what to it. That's the data they gave us. And even with that data, when we went through it, we saw a lot of discrepancies. We saw a number of people that had the wrong district information listed or had no district information listed. And if they didn't have district information listed, that means they did not get, their votes were not given any points, which would affect the weighting. And then we also discovered that there were 1,422 voters, whereas at the convention, they told us that there were 1,248 credentialed voters. So suddenly we found 174 extra voters in the data that they gave us, not even the raw data. So I communicated this immediately to the Michigan Democratic Party leadership and said, let's try to resolve this. There are discrepancies. We want everybody to be confident of the vote. And I was just ignored and really stonewalled repeatedly for days. So it came to filing a lawsuit to try to get the data.
Wow, thank you, and thank you so much for describing that complex situation. And it's also, man, very reminiscent of some of what we've seen recently. And I I'm wondering, we've seen this sort of thing happen in the past. And it's kind of striking to see something like it happen in Michigan, particularly the way that, it seems like they would be extra cautious, knowing that, there's the the diaspora that lives in Michigan and their needs and concerns and how this would look, at least. Um, so I wanted to wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit more about how your campaign has responded, what actions you've taken, what kind of response you've gotten from the Michigan Democratic Party. I know you described it a little bit just there, but maybe you could expound on that just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, because there is a lot more to say. And I think one of my greatest reaction or feeling about this is shocking and terribly sad and unfortunate because especially this election season that we're going into, and the Michigan Democratic Party talking about the electoral integrity and protecting our democracy, and then to behave like this and to refuse any kind of transparency, it sends the wrong message. And you as a party have left hundreds of new voters, new members of the party, feeling like their vote doesn't count. And if you feel like your vote doesn't count, you're not going to come out to vote. And that was the experience they got from attending that convention and then following up, just asking for transparency and being ignored. I asked in direct email to the party leadership, but I know that at least 2,000, if not more, emails have been sent to party leadership also from Michigan Democratic Party members and the larger Michigan electorate saying, show us the raw data. And they have been ignored, no response. So this also goes to, this begs the question, two questions. One, why not? Is there something to hide? And two, why are you treating your voters like this? Why are you treating people like this who you want to come on, who you need to support you in order to prevail and to win Michigan in November? If you say that that is so important, why are you treating people like this, like they don't count? And that is what the community has been feeling. These are the messages that we've been getting. I've been seeing a lot of discussion on social media and people communicating directly with me and on chat groups, people very angry and saying like, I was willing to consider to vote Democrat, but after what I've seen they've done or the message that they're giving me, no way. Why? We don't have a place in this party. These are all the kinds of messages that we're getting. And again, the question to the Michigan Democratic Party, like, why? Why are you doing this? Especially if you're so confident of the results and there's nothing to hide. Why avoid any kind of transparency? And when what the Michigan Democratic Party told me is that they have no process for doing a recount or auditing a vote, even if there were problems with it. Like, they don't have any mechanism by which to do that. They don't have to do that. The only thing I could do is to file a complaint with their appeals committee if I felt aggrieved. So I did immediately file a complaint with um, their appeals committee, but their appeals committee takes 30 to 45 days to resolve an issue. And obviously that's not going to be in time to resolve the issue if there was a mistake on the ballot and I should be on the ballot. And so I asked for the consideration of the appeal to be expedited in light of the short time frame that we have, and that was rejected. So they're coming to say that they don't have to answer to the membership, they don't have to produce raw data or be transparent, and they don't have to provide any mechanism for reviewing what's clearly a flawed electoral or voting process and results. That is what compelled us in the end to go to court. We went to the state court, the Ingham County Circuit Court, and we did not even raise the myriad of constitutional claims that we have. We just raised issues that had to do with the Michigan Democratic Party not following their own bylaws. They did not tabulate the vote as they were supposed to. Then they allowed people who were not credentialed to vote. That's why we have 174 extra voters. They are keeping the data from us, and this is supposed to be, their laws say that there are no secret ballots and other violations. The Michigan Democratic Party came into court not contesting what we were saying about the flawed data or anything like that, mainly saying this is an internal party issue and the court should stay out of it. Essentially saying we don't have to be accountable to our membership. And again, that was just another blow to here is a party that I consider myself a part of and want to improve and want to strengthen. And this is the message that they're giving, is that we don't have to be accountable to our membership, and it doesn't matter if the vote is screwed up. We don't have to review it, and the courts can't make us because they need to stay out. This is an intra-party affair. So where does that leave people like us who really want to just engage in the democratic process, want to make a difference, want to run for positions or office? It's just like the leadership of the party telling you that they run things and there's nothing you can do about it.
Wow. Yeah, again, thank you for giving us that kind of ground's eye view of what, you and your supporters are going through. Um, I was wondering if we could kind of zoom in to a different part or a different aspect of your campaign here, and a little bit away from Michigan Democratic Party and more about what is currently going on over at the University of Michigan. We ran a story last week about how they've kind of tweaked some of their codes of conduct in a very dubious way in response to some of the anti-genocide protests going on. So I wonder if you could maybe respond to how the university more broadly has responded to the anti-genocide demonstrations on campus, and in particular some of those recent changes to the code of conduct.
Yeah, it is, again, unfortunate. Like I mentioned, I am a graduate of the University of Michigan. I am a proud alum, and I want to see my university always doing the right thing, always remaining the best of the best when it comes to not just knowledge production, but also ethical governance and supporting its university community to be the best. And that is not what we have been seeing. We have been seeing really unjustified repression of and targeting of people who have a specific viewpoint. This is really illegal. It's like viewpoint targeting. You're treating people with this particular viewpoint differently than you're treating other people. And again, on a university campus is the last place you should be seeing this. It shouldn't be anywhere in the United States, but the university campuses certainly should be the last place where you are seeing this. And therefore, we are seeing various restrictions that are being put on people's right to protest and to express their viewpoint, and at the same time being gaslighted by the university administration that at the same time they issue these restrictions or they arrest people or they injure people, then they're putting out statements reaffirming how the university respects the right to free expression. And it is a manipulation of the facts. Just to give you one kind of clear in your face example, when the university attacked the encampment that they had up this last spring, the university had students, sorry, on the diag, they violently called in the police to violently dismantle this encampment and simultaneously put up a statement saying how the university respects and honors freedom of expression and people's right to protest, but they had to take the encampment down because of certain violations. For example, violations to the fire code. And they claimed that the students leading the encampment were not respecting the fire code, and that caused basically a safety concern. And it was really lies. They said that one of the things the students were doing is having open flames. And you asked the organizers what open flames, or why aren't you responding? And you got a clear answer that we don't have any open flames here. The only ones we had were candles when we did our Shabbat services for our Jewish comrades. And that is another thing. The encampments and the protesters have been accused of being anti-Semitic, when really a lot of the organizers, or a core part of this group of protesters, are Jewish, and they have fostered an environment of really openness, an environment that accepts everybody, an environment that calls for respect for all people's race, religion, ethnicities, everything, and calls for equal rights and respecting human rights. And we're campaigning together for an end to genocide, an end to human rights abuses. So the universities are saying that we had to tear down this encampment because they were violating the fire code, including by having open flames, and they weren't respecting, orders. And the truth being, the only open flames they ever had was Shabbat candles when they are doing their Shabbat services. So it is, again, outrageous. It's disappointing. And when it came to, so they violently dismantled the encampment, and then they issued notices to all of these, a large group of students, 2 days before a deadline that they had for a protest that took place back in November. So 2 days to the 6-month mark of when this protest took place, they issued notices to all of these students saying that a complaint has been filed against you based on this action, and we have to open a process of conflict resolution. And that's when I began to represent a student and attended a conflict resolution meeting with a student, only to find out that there actually had not been a complaint filed against this student yet, and it's that the complaint would be coming, and that when the complaint finally came, it was late. And because according to the student statement of rights and responsibilities about how these things are supposed to be handled, a faculty, staff, or student has 6 months to file a complaint from the date that an incident occurs, an alleged violation. They have 6 months to file a complaint. So we had a situation where it was well beyond the 6 months, and it wasn't even a staff, student, or faculty that filed a complaint, but the university hired a consultant from California to come in and file complaints against all of these students, which not only violated, again, the provision of the statement that says student, staff, or faculty, but also the spirit of this statement of rights and responsibilities, which is like a contract between the university and students. Like, this is the behavior that's expected. If there are violations, these are the steps that will be taken. And one of the reasons that student, staff, or faculty are the ones to file complaints if there's a violation is because this is intended to really maintain the integrity, the safety, the cohesive and peaceful environment of the university. So to bring someone from outside who has no interest whatsoever in the university to file a complaint against students well past the deadline, and then on top of that, to not allow students one of the most commonly used methods of resolving these disputes, which is alternative dispute resolution. Although it is the method most commonly used to resolve conflicts or complaints, they took that off the table from the beginning with these students. So they wanted to put them through a process where you either have a hearing or you accept responsibility and what comes of that. So again, this was incredibly frustrating to see that the university would go to these extent, this extent to go after students really for nonviolent protests against genocide. And then, as you said, a few weeks after they were doing this, they violated again, the university violated its own procedures and codified their misdeeds. So they passed these sweeping resolutions to the student statement of rights and responsibilities to codify everything that they had done that was wrong. And there is a procedure for for passing amendments, and that procedure has to involve a time frame for community and student input that has to be done within a certain time, not in the summer when nobody's there and in a quick motion in the Board of Regents, you introduce a motion to accept all of these drastic changes and pass it without any kind of comment. And that's what was done. And this is part of what the regents are complicit in the unjustified kind of crackdown and repression on their own students, faculty, and staff. And that's why the students came to me to say, we want someone to stand up for us, for our rights, protect our civil rights on campus, to protect our bodies, even our presence on campus, to protect you have situations where staff and faculty are losing their positions on campus because of their support for these anti-genocide protests. And these are all violations of people's rights to engage in free expression. They're being, again, egregiously violated by the university with the complicity of the, or even at the will of the Board of Regents. And that's what got me into the race. What the Michigan Democratic Party did, I did not make it as a candidate to run for in the general election to be a regent, but I think the struggle has to continue to demand better from the University of Michigan, from the Board of Regents, and from the Michigan Democratic Party, or all parties that really claim to represent people. I mean, we either live in a democracy where we respect the rights that we have, or we don't.
Well, thank you so much for, especially, we've been reporting on what's been going on at U of M, but, aside from some conversations I've had with a few colleagues, we haven't really had anybody on the show to really describe what's going on there. We've, of course, had some folks here at Western talk about what's a lot of that, a lot of connections, a lot of that similar stonewalling from the university. Nothing quite as extreme as what happened over on the east side, but again, a lot of similarities, in that sense. I was wondering if you could maybe tell the listeners a little bit more about your platform, and it remains to be seen. You may end up on the ballot yet. We'll see. And I'm curious, kind of what some of the main things you were running on, and maybe how that could apply to universities here in Michigan more broadly. Again, we're broadcasting out of WMU on the southwest side, so kind of curious what you were running on, and if you do make it on the ballot in November, what you would be bringing to the table.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So, first and foremost, what I had wanted to stress is that students deserve a voice. Students, faculty, and staff. I mean, the Board of Regents, it governs the university, but they are kind of responsible for the environment that is created for these students, faculty, and staff to thrive, and they should have a voice and should not be attacked like they were. And so, one of my primary things was bringing that voice to the table and making sure that the way the governance is done is not just that the Board of Regents is this elite institution that is not connected to the people whose lives they affect, but that there is more of a collaborative relationship. And that is really how I do everything. All of my organizing and everything is all about collaboration. I think that makes institutions, organizations stronger. But then there were some very specific also policies that I was talking about enacting One is, making sure that we are keeping the University of Michigan affordable for Michiganders. Uh, and we have University of Michigan has certain things in place. They have a Go Blue guarantee that provides free tuition for students coming from households making under 75,000. But that's still such a barrier to a lot of people because it's only tuition. It doesn't cover housing, which is super expensive in Ann Arbor. It doesn't cover books and other fees. And and it's also hard to meet that threshold because of how it's calculated, how much income a family has. So I wanted to make it so that every Michigander who wants to go to the University of Michigan is able to, that finances aren't a barrier. And another uh, policy would be to make sure that we are not only talking about diversity and inclusion, but enacting policies to strengthen that. And one problem that we see is that students, young people in historically kind of marginalized, less wealthy communities are don't have the same kind of resources and information needed in order to know how to be a successful applicant to the University of Michigan. So, for example, we can, as a university, enact programs where we are going to a lot of these communities and catching these students when they are in junior high school, when they are in eighth or ninth grade, and informing them about what it takes to, that you can start preparing from now to have a successful application to the University of Michigan. So it's not just about talking, about our values in inclusion and diversity and all, but making sure that we have the policies to ensure that. I was big and am big on ethical governance and sustainable investment. And this would go to making sure that none of our investments are supporting human rights abuses. So this would be also in line with what the students are asking, that we review, we that the board is transparent about where our investments are, and we implement an ethical investment policy where we are not investing in corporations that are complicit in human rights abuses, just like we don't want to be investing in corporations that are harming the environment, in fossil fuels, etc. And then student well-being and support was another big one. Again, we should not be attacking our students, but we should be creating the environment that fosters their development and their ability to go out and be really leaders of this world, not only locally, but nationally and globally. And we've had, unfortunately, as we have seen over the last couple of years, instances come to light of horrific abuse of students, and not enough being done to support those students in seeking justice. And a lot of that comes down to recognizing harm that has been done, respecting people, and and then how do you remedy these violations of people's rights and the real harm that's been done. So expanding resources on campus to provide a diverse field of experts in this area, and our policy of dealing with students who have been harmed by university policies of the university. And probably there are a lot more, but I think probably the last one I wanted to mention, uh, it came to my mind and it escaped me, but I'll bring it up if it came again. But there was also, I had a list, and on my website, it's listed some of them also, which is huwaidaforumich.com. But it talks about also making sure that we are investing in making environmental policies and improving uh, and investing again in the technology and the education and the innovation to make sure that the university is carbon free by a certain period, that we are kind of leaders in innovation in protecting our planet. So it is a policy that goes to, oh, I remember the last one, sorry, it had to do with transparency and conflict of interest, and that goes back to ethical governance. We do have situations, I think, where we have seen conflicts of interest, where we have people serving on the board of the university that are also gaining in other respects, and so tightening up these policies on transparency and conflicts of interest, so that again, the board of Regents is governing from a place that has the interests of the university community at heart. But people can read more on my website or contact me if they want more information. And let's hope there's still a chance to get on the ballot. The window is closing because September 6th, so last Friday, was the day for finalizing the names on the ballot, but the ballots have not been printed yet. We are still asking the University of Michigan to, we are still asking the Michigan Democratic Party to release the raw voting data, just so, and something that they should want to do. If we are able to get it this week, then maybe there's a chance to still make it on the ballot. But like I said, the window is closing. And even if I don't, I think that we need to continue doing the work to make sure that these organizations are truly democratic and representing us. Because if we're talking about protecting our democracy and making sure that we have a democracy where people feel valued and respected and protected, then these policies, both at the University of Michigan and the Michigan Democratic Party, have got to change.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending time on our program today, really illuminating all the issues going on with your campaign, what's going on in Ann Arbor. I want to leave you with one final question, and it's a little bit different than what I was originally going to ask, but I think it's kind of on a similar track, and I'm just curious. How would you recommend students around the state of Michigan engage not only with the critical issue of what's going on in Gaza, but how would you recommend that they engage with their universities to kind of, again, foster a more kind of democratic relationship between them and the university body? And are there any key lessons you think they should draw from your experience trying to run with the MDP?
Wow, that is a big question. I think the students have been doing really a tremendous job of utilizing the resources that they have and their knowledge, their reach, their education, in order to really do what they can to campaign against genocide. It's easy enough to say after the fact that you are against genocide, but when it is happening right now, to put yourself on the line, as the students have been, to uh, to move towards policy change, is really admirable. Because, as I said, these students, the faculty and staff, they are risking their jobs, they are risking their futures. You have law firms and other corporations or companies right now that are scouring people's social medias and listing as a criteria for hiring that they are not involved in Palestinian advocacy. And every day I'm seeing, not just from people from the University of Michigan, but students across the country, of job offers that are being rescinded because of their Palestinian rights advocacy. And this is truly, truly shameful. So I really respect and don't want to insinuate in any way that I have more uh, experience or knowledge as to how to best engage than these students, because they have been leading the way. And to give you one example, I was in a foreign country at a conference, uh, and a journalist who found I was from Michigan told me that she was just at the University of Michigan at the encampment, and she was raving about how the organizers of the encampment were so impressive. And this is a foreign journalist, and she was saying that she noticed provocateurs and people trying to incite the organizers of the encampment. And she, as a journalist, wanted to go over there and talk to them. And the organizers of the encampment actually saying, no, let's not engage. Let's not allow them to incite us. Let's continue doing what we're doing. And they had educational programs, and they had discussions and talks about inclusivity. And like I said, these joint religious ceremonies and other things that was really a model I think that the University of Michigan should have and should be proud of. And I think in a few years down the line, they will be proud that their students did this. They won't be proud of their actions and will probably try to rewrite history to make it seem as if they were supportive of what their students were doing. But it's really something to be proud of. And when it comes to the genocide that's happening, where you can engage, I always say engage where you feel that you can make a difference. A lot of it is education, because people don't know, certainly from our mainstream media, they don't get what's going on. So as much as you can educate people, and then you want to move that education, that knowledge into action. And what we need is a change of US policy, right? So we have to engage our policymakers, our members of Congress, to get them to speak out, to get them to vote a certain way. And people have been doing that or there's been an increase in that. And then, part of changing policy is advocacy with your decision makers, but it's also for deciding to run yourself. If you're not happy with the people representing you, then you go out there and run for office, or support someone who's running for office. We have a lot to do to change how our campaigns are run. And I'm specifically referring to campaign finance, and the fact that all of this is on money, which contributes to so much corruption and takes away from people's vote and real democracy. But getting involved in campaigns can go a long way in helping smaller candidates that don't, or candidates, I didn't mean to say small, but that don't have the resources that some of these others do, to actually be able to get far, be able to get votes, and that we can overcome this corruption of big money in our politics. So there's a lot to be saying there. To summarize it, students, I think, have been doing a wonderful job. As much as we can educate, and what we can do to turn that education into advocacy by advocating that we change policy. And you can change it at the state and federal level, but also when we look at our institutions divesting, it's what helped bring down the apartheid regime in South Africa, right? You divest from corporations that are responsible there. That puts economic pressure that it takes to kind of dismantle an unjust system. And that's what the students were pursuing. And it's something that we can all do also at a local level. I think that there is something every single one of us can do. And I thank you for doing it by using your show and your voice to educate. If we're truly serious when we talk about respect for human rights and all lives are valuable, and never again, then we all have a responsibility right now.
Well, I want to wrap this up by once again thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on our program. Thank you also. There's a reason they call it running for office. You certainly get put through the paces, and especially when some of your key issues are stances that are very unpopular with some of the people in power. That again, it reveals a lot of dedication and tenacity. So thank you on behalf of organizers, the movement itself, and we will keep our listeners updated on your situation as it unfolds. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this up?
Um, I think we covered a lot, and I appreciate it. I would just really urge, and I think you have indicated that you have been covering this a lot, the genocide, but what is happening is truly unimaginable, and we all have a role to play, because, especially in this country, because it's our tax dollars that's being used to send weapons that are tearing children apart and leaving them, if not dead, then limbless and orphaned. And that comes back to what each and every one of us can do. So again, thank you for using your platform to get that message out. And I would just encourage listeners that not to have it seem so overwhelming, that it's so big, there's nothing I can do. If everyone said that, then truly we would lose. But each and every one of us has a role. Every day we can be speaking out against this genocide, and all our voices together will bring about the change that we need to save lives.
All right. Thank you once again so much.
Thank you for having me.